If LinkedIn has been on your to-do list forever, then you're in luck because enrollment is currently open for October's LinkedIn Content Sprint. I've got 20 spots available for impactful small business owners ready to create timeless and strategic thought leadership content to attract inbound business opportunities. So if you're listening to this right now, then there is still a spot left for you. So go to lumosmarketing.co to sign up.
I feel like I am being able to be more honest with myself about who I am and the things that I'm learning and where I am now and where I've been and where I would like to go. And to be able to share that and share that with an audience and have people responding to it. And I just feel so excited and so invigorated every time somebody writes to me and says, I'm so glad you articulated this. I didn't know anybody else felt like that, or you're making me feel like I can do this. And I do. I really believe that we can all share our gifts and that we all have something really unique to share with the world. And so, yeah, it is scary, but it's worth it.
Hey, I'm Tania Bhattacharyya, and you are listening to the CAMPFIRE CIRCLE podcast. We are all about breaking down the boardroom table as the ultimate space of leadership, and instead replacing it with a campfire, because that's where we share our stories. That's where we build warm community, and that is where there's always room. I'm building an impactful business in public through thought leadership, and I'm taking you behind the scenes all along the way. So if you want to stand out as you stand up for your mission, you are in the right place. Hey, fire starters. I am beyond thrilled to have my friend Kel Haney with us today, and she is going to be sharing about her work in the world and a case study for what can be possible as you share your authentic personal stories and intentionally build community on LinkedIn. So Kel, I am so happy to have you here by the campfire. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Tania. I'm so excited to be here. I'm such a super fan of everything you're doing. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. And you know, I'm a super fan of what you do since I am also a fundraiser by trade. So we have all kinds of things that we could talk about. But first, I would love for you to tell our listeners about yourself. What do you do and who do you do it for?
So I'm an outbound fundraising expert. What I do is I focus specifically on consulting, coaching, and training folks on how to fundraise. And specifically, I like to say how to take the ick out of the ask. So it's all about shifting the narrative away from transactional encounters and instead towards relationship building opportunities. So I work independently, and I'm also a senior consultant at Donorly, which is a consulting firm that is out of New York City, but has clients all over the country.
I love that so much. That's, like I said, definitely a transformation that tugs on my own heart. I have definitely been in a place of the ick. And as you very well know, I think fundraising is one of the most transformative things that we can do as we build a bridge between people's hearts and how they want to show up in the world and helping them operationalize that. So I love that. I love that. So we know the what of what you do, and we love the what of what we do. We know the who of who you serve, but can you tell me more about the why? Can you tell me the story of what you have grown through to become the guide that you are today?
Absolutely. So I fell into fundraising. I fell into the not-for-profit sector, as I feel like a lot of us did in some ways. So I was a theater director in New York City. I was a theater director for almost 20 years. And so I was pounding the pavement in New York City. And in my 20s, I needed to do something to supplement my basically non-existent income as a theater director. So I started fundraising for a theater, Manhattan Theater Club, in New York City, where I was also an intern and was working for the artistic director. And so I started to make phone calls, fundraising phone calls for them. And it was just so natural to me. I've always loved to be on the phone. I've always loved to connect with people and to be able to talk to people about theater, which was my favorite thing. And this theater that for the longest time I actually wanted to run. And so I would say that on the phone that I want to run this theater someday. And the artistic director knew that was what I thought was going to be my creative path. So I got really good really fast. I raised, I don't know, $6-7 million in less than 8 years, all in gifts, predominantly under 2,000. And it was just because it was something I loved. So I didn't have a traditional background in fundraising or in sales. So it was all coming from a very genuine, authentic, intuitive place. So I started there. And after some time, I got burnt out and I took a little break and was focusing just on my theater career as a director. But as the not for profit world is very small. So there were people who knew how good I was at what I did. So I started having other theaters, colleagues who'd moved on to other positions, ask if I could come work with them. So it became this parallel career I didn't anticipate, where I was consulting and I was training other people how to be fundraisers over the phone. And then the pandemic happened and I started to fundraise full time just to do something when I couldn't be in the rehearsal room. And I just realized theater was my favorite thing for so long, and pursuing that career was so important to me. But I found this other path that I actually think I have something more unique and more specific to offer the world as a fundraising coach, consultant, trainer than I did as a theater director. I was really good at that and I really loved it. But a lot of people can do that and do that well. But I feel like I have something very specific to offer the world in this way. And it's feeling really great.
I love that so much. And it feels great because you're very obviously integrating your like calling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your passion, your lived experience, your credibility, the thing that you have done over and over and have like receipts around. And you've put that all together into this mosaic of you doing your life's work. And it's amazing to see. It's amazing to see. And something else that stuck out for me when you were talking about making these calls is even when you were starting to fundraise, you would bring your lived experience into it. You were saying like, I want to, run this theater one day, and you're building relationships by sharing your story, because how else do you build relationships? You share of yourself, you learn about the other person, you vibe together. So I love that so much.
I agree with you totally. Starting with our own why. Simon Sinek, I think he's really got that right.
Yeah.
And I think it's both in the work that you're doing in terms of encouraging people in their own thought leaderships. Same thing with fundraising, of getting really clear of how to articulate our own whys, and that's very vulnerable to do. And that's not always easy, but the clearer we are with ourselves and why we're doing what we're passionate about, and that's what makes us connect to others. And it's all about connection. It's all about making those connections.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So tell me a little bit more about some of the barriers, the fears, the concerns, like the scary stories, right? We're by the campfire. So tell me about
Mm-hmm.
the scary stories, because I know that
Mm-hmm.
even though you have decades of experience as a fundraiser, as a theater director, this most recent time that you joined the LinkedIn Content Sprint was one of your first forays into building your own personal executive visibility and personal brand as a thought leader, as a go-to
Mm-hmm.
voice. So like, what were some of the scary moments around that for you?
I think, and you say this a lot, and I appreciate this, is that we really are through our own thought leadership, healing our own wounds. And I think for me, for the longest time, the fact that I was a fundraiser was my dirty little secret. It wasn't something that I
Mm.
talked about in my theater career. And part of that is because I came up in a moment where the people who were getting ahead, for the most part, were white men, cis men who had some kind of familial means, had some other way of supporting themselves. So it was like pretending like I wasn't doing all of this work on the side, that I somehow magically at 25, 26 was able to support myself with a directing career, which is not possible. Like it's actually not possible. And there's ways that the economic system in the theater is really fractured and needs to really be repaired and rebuilt. So I think for me, it's just about getting comfortable being visible, period, with this skill and this gift that I had that I hid, because I thought in some ways that was diminishing my work as a director. And it never was. It was always, like you said, in conversation with and a part of myself. So I think that's been a big barrier for me in a larger sense. And I think in terms of specifically joining the content sprint, was just the imposter syndrome, things that you talk about all the time, which I appreciate. And just seeing, oh, here are all these people who are further along in their journeys, who have more followers or already have a lead generator made. I was like, I don't have any of that yet. And I think having the fear that I didn't have enough to say. For me, it's always, am I enough? Do I have enough? I'm afraid that I'm going to say everything. Do I have enough things to say for 6 months of content? That was what I was afraid of, was that I truly just wasn't enough myself and that I didn't have enough to contribute.
There's so much I want to say that my legs are tingling. I'm like, I'm about to explode
I
with
love that.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that and sharing so authentically where you were at. And I think that you're certainly not the only one that has
Mhm.
experienced that. And it's interesting because I have gotten to know you, and as somebody who has raised millions of dollars in donations of $2,000 and under, there's a real tenacity and confidence that
Yeah.
you have, right? When you are fundraising. I mean, just that alone, that receipt just knocks my socks off. And I know how good you are at like lifting up a mission and bringing attention to the good work of a team, a show, a creative project, but it is so different when we are doing it for ourselves. But at the end of the day, it still is about lifting up a mission because I know that you have there's a lot that you're accomplishing through your thought leadership, including lifting up your business and all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think this work is very much also about like helping people shift their hearts and minds around a misunderstood subject. And I think fundraising is definitely such a misunderstood subject. There was that meme that was floating around like a couple years ago. It was like, this is what my friends think I do. This is what I actually
Yes.
do. And like the fundraising memes were
It also harkens back again to what does that mean in terms of thought leadership or visibility or quote unquote networking. It's like some people hear all of those words and they get the ick the way some people do about fundraising and just how to break down those barriers. I find that they're very similar, that those
yeah.
challenges are very similar. And it really is harkens back to being vulnerable and how scary that is to be vulnerable. And that authenticity is always what gets us where we want to get, which is just authentically connecting with other people. But that takes a level of vulnerability and a level of risk. And I think that's very similar between fundraising and also sharing thought leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And vulnerability is such a difficult thing to hold by ourselves. And that's why
Mhm.
community is such an important part of this work. And you are extraordinary at building community. And like, I don't know if you know this, but I love creeping on my people. And so I've been creeping on you
Yes.
behind the scenes, of course. And you get so much wonderful engagement. People are leaving you long, thoughtful, heartfelt comments in response to the posts that you're putting out there on LinkedIn. And so
Mhm.
I love the way that you think about this work as not just sharing content, but really building community.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about the ways that you show up that really bring out that community aspect, that community building aspect?
Tanya, that is such a good question. I love it. I think it's numerous factors. I think part of it is something I've really learned and been inspired from you, which is this idea of really thinking about who is your audience and who are you trying to reach with your content. So I'm always thinking about that. I'm thinking about who are the people who are fundraisers or who want to fundraise specifically for a passion project, and how do I want to reach them with what I do know and the experiences I have and the questions I'm asking myself or the questions I can ask a younger version or a less experienced version of myself may be asking. So I'm really trying to always keep my audience in mind. I also having very quality content is really important to me. I'm not interested in anything that feels navel gazy or clickbaity. I am not looking to build transactional relationships. Is exactly what I train in fundraising. Is I'm looking for relationship building opportunities. I'm not looking for quick transactions. I'm looking for building my brand with people who want to be in the same conversation that I'm in. So I'm really, if anything, I think I might get too in depth in each of my posts. I probably could do less, but I just want that to be part of what I'm sharing, whether it's a post or whether it's a freebie that I'm offering or whether it's a newsletter that's going out via email. I want any content from me to really be gold and to really feel like it's worth somebody's time. I'm just so aware of the thousands of ways we're all pulled and pushed throughout the day. And I just want when someone comes across my content in whatever way that it really is a break and that it really is a moment to be like, I'm going to get something that's going to be valuable out of this and that's going to be really true and authentic. So I think it's that. I also think it's about the relationships that I'm building, whether it's in the comments section, whether it's in direct messages over LinkedIn, whether it's about bringing conversations I'm having in other parts of my work and other parts of my professional and personal life, like encouraging to have those conversations in public in the comments section. So I'm thinking about that a lot just in how I'm cultivating. It's just these are deep conversations that I'm having in the rest of my life. And then just finding ways to make sure we're also having that in public so other people can share it. I also think it's about the call to action. I'm just really always thinking about what's the call to action. And when I do ask people and reach out to specific individuals to say, oh, I think you might be interested in what I've written this week, the thoughts I'm sharing, I would specifically like to hear from you. So it's never from a place of, I want to boost engagement or get the algorithm happy. It's really from a place of, I'd really love to hear what you have to say on this topic. I'd really love that. It's just the tip of the iceberg is my goal, is whatever I'm sharing opens up a much larger conversation across our community.
That is so fabulous. That is so there's so much, again, there's so much I want to say because that is so good and juicy. I mean, something that came up as you were sharing is that, yes, this is in one way, like sharing our content is free labor on our part. But at the end of the day, folks are really paying with their time and attention, and you never know where that's going to go. Like we were sharing in the green room that you were introduced to me through somebody, that you're close to, and she happened to be
Yeah.
reading my LinkedIn content.
That was Sandra Davis, who's the president of Donorly. That's the consulting firm I work with. And she mentioned you to me. And then I just flew looking at your content and then listening to the podcast. I was like, oh, I can listen to all of these. Every time I was on a walk with my dog before the content sprint, I was like, I want to get through all of these as I can and just gather all of this gold because it really is there in the pods. But yeah, it really is that familiarity, building that familiarity before you actually even are one-on-one with somebody.
That I love, especially because now, it's 2023 and I'm getting ready to go to several conferences later this year. Like I'm speaking at the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference and the Mental Health Marketing Conference and the Make Your Mark Conference. Do they all start with M? Anyway, and I digress.
And I know how much you love alliteration. So
I do. I know, I really, really do. But I've noticed when I go to these in-person things, people are like, oh, you're Tania. Like, I've read your LinkedIn content. And so there's immediately there's immediately like a connection. I don't have to, and especially as a somewhat awkward introvert, it really, really helps having that sort of in ready to go. But I'd love to know for you, like, how has this work of the last 5 to 6 months of showing up as a thought leader on LinkedIn, how has that impacted your coaching and consulting business?
I think in a really similar way of just being able to build a shorthand really quickly. Something I think about is I used to feel like when someone reached out to have an exploratory call, I really felt like we had to spend the first 10 minutes basically giving a version of what I just did at the top of your podcast and just introducing them to me. And now I feel like people enter the conversation and we can build a shorthand a lot quicker. So I find that people are already listening. They already know some things about me. And there's just a level of enthusiasm and an excitement that feels new. That it's like I'm already putting out there a whole bunch of content, a whole bunch of thoughts and experiences, sharing my experiences. And I feel like it builds a shorthand really, really quickly. And I love it for a lot of reasons. I also find sometimes I'm in conversations with people who aren't in a place to afford the price points of what I offer. And I can say, well, I have so much free content. I want to make sure that I always have material that's accessible to everybody. So I know it's not the same as actually working one-on-one. There's always so much more, or one-to-many. There's always so much more content to get. Like it really is just a portion of what I offer, what I'm saying. But I don't also feel like I'm withholding it all. I'm just sharing, okay, well, this is what I feel like is most useful to the most general public that we can. But you're right about the lurkers. I find that super fascinating. And I very early, I think we were still in the content sprint, I had a Broadway producer reach out to me. And this is an individual who's won lots of Tonys, who's like very, very successful. And he reached out to me via LinkedIn. And when I did take a couple meetings with him and when we met in person, he said, I could just tell, and he was reading specifically, I think, my intro, that he said, you could be running any of these not-for-profit theaters. You could be the director of development. You've got a tenacity to you and you want to do this differently, which is true. And that I felt like he really saw me, and he really saw me because of what I was sharing on LinkedIn. And who would have ever thought that?
Yeah. You mentioned excitement and you mentioned enthusiasm. And yes, like 100%, those two things are like emergent properties of this work of thought leadership. But I think another way to describe it is trust. Like you're building trust with people. Like people trust that you are who you say you are and that you have this like driving passion and credibility that really positions you as that go-to person. And I love what you said about accessibility and having almost like this library of free resources that you're building up so that anybody at any level of their journey, you have something for them. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, me too.
That's so good. How do you use your own personal story as you are coaching folks, as you're thinking about new offers in your business? I know you have a thing around like a 5-minute fundraising ask. Like, how do you use your own story to inspire your business offerings?
Well, my story is just so interwoven in everything I do. And I think it's
Yeah.
coming from a place that, again, I was not strategic. I did not have a plan when I started doing this 18 years ago. It was truly, I needed to supplement my income. And what was for me, the most fun way to do that? Luckily, that ended up being lucrative for me and really rewarding for me in ways I never anticipated. So, in terms of you mentioned my 5-minute fundraising ask training. That's something that I offer to not for profits. And I can truly I feel like I can train anyone to fundraise if they're passionate about the org or the project that they're raising money for. And what's unique about me is because I spent those years on the phone, I truly have tens of thousands of fundraising asks. I would say conservatively, I've made 20,000 asks, which like that
Wow.
volume is wild, right? And the reason I did that is because I was doing it over the phone. So this was within 5 minutes. So I have a methodology that I've developed that's basically we're creating a tent for our conversation, and a tent that's got open on all sides. People can come and go as they please, that we're in there, and you can come join us in the tent. And the tent has 4 tent poles. And so those are different moments that within that 5-minute phone call, you're going to reach those marks. But in the middle of that, you've got totally the space to go on tributaries, just like you would in any regular conversation. And so I've really figured out a methodology, and it's based on me figuring out, well, what did I do for so long that was so successful? How was I able to build trust, as you said, and build a rapport and be able to get to a place with somebody over the phone that I don't know, who's not expecting that I was going to call them? How was I able to get to the point that they would be willing to make a donation and get further involved within that phone call? So it was really almost engineering backwards of what was I doing? Why was that working? And some of it is just figuring out, well, what are my impulses? And then what about my impulses can I teach other people how to do?
Mm. There's nothing I love more than a good framework. And you just described so beautifully how to come up with a version of your framework. Frameworks are so important because they're a way to like package and productize our expertise in a way that people can see, understand, pick up, and work through. So, 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 so good. I love that. You've done content about that, right? I think I've seen it.
Yeah, I've got some content about it. And it's something that I'm also just thinking about how I'm going to roll out a little differently. As you said, how to get personal. What I've realized is that in terms of my framework, yes, that's something that I have been talking about. And I'll continue to talk about some more in terms of this 5-minute fundraising ask and building your own tent. I just recently realized that a big part of my wedding was us putting up a tent ourselves. We got married on this small island in Maine where we're now living. And I have all of these photos of my husband and my brother and all of our friends helping the guy who's now my neighbor and my friend put up the tent. And I just was thinking that it's funny the things that subconsciously stick with us. And tent felt important and tent poles felt important as opposed to pillars. I felt that feels like systemic and unmoving. And I like the idea that we can pitch our tent anywhere and that we can all be a part of that. So yeah, I'm really excited to continue to talk about that some more. And again, that's really is the framework that I train. So I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to get that framework out in the most digestible way in terms of shorter LinkedIn posts. But it's definitely something I'm continuing to share.
I love how you said that, like, it's almost subconsciously entered in, like, the memory, because I think that there's something really beautiful about that. And I think that people can pick up on the energy behind that kind of stuff. Like, it's even with this campfire kind of thing. I love bonfires and community. And I feel like people have just a response to that. So I really love how you've created your framework. I think it's
Thank you.
fabulous.
And I just realized that as I'm in this farmhouse fixer-upper that we've just bought, and we don't have the backyard set up the way I want it yet, but at the same time, I've just bought a tent so that I can sit outside and make that my outdoor office. So watch
Oh,
out. I'll probably also post some photos of like my makeshift office before we have the 3-season porch and the patio that we want to have someday. I just have this tent that I bought on the internet and a little desk. My husband jokes that all we need is for him to write me a little sign that says like Kel Haney, fundraising coach, consultant, and trainer, and I'll put it on there and I can sit in the backyard with it.
please do. Please do.
I will.
Oh my God, I love it. So you mentioned a little bit of content and that kind of
Mm.
thing. I really would love to hear about your experience of batching 6 months of content for the sprint. Because as I talk to people about the sprint, one of the biggest things is 6 months of content. Like, I don't even know what I'm going to be doing in 6 months. And I think I work with a lot of folks who are creative, and you are definitely a creative. And so, what was it like to create 6 months of content in one fell swoop?
I was really excited about it. I was really excited about the community and the community that you were building. And I just knew that whomever was going to be part of that sprint were people that were like minded and interested in a more inclusive, supportive world. So I was super excited just to see who was there and to connect with other people. That felt really great to me, especially just because it is so personal and so insular to be creating content. So in all honesty, I wasn't as fast, I don't think, if I'm comparing myself to other people. I remember someone else in the content was on a plane and said, "Oh, I wrote 5, 6 of these during that flight." For me, it really would take me about an hour per post in terms of getting out my thoughts. And I just ended up being okay with that. So I knew we had time that we were all spending every week, but I also spent a lot of time outside of that I was just, for me, I was just carving it out. And I just was like, if I've got this time with you, and like truly, Tanya, you are a superb copy editor. Once upon a time, I was an English major and I did write a lot, but I wasn't in the habit of writing. So that was something that I did get faster and I did get better as I went. But just having your support along the way was really great. But it was a lot, like being truly honest for me and how much I wanted to get out of it. And that I really did want to have my 6 months ish worth of content. That felt really important. I also started posting for the first time while we were in the sprint. And so that was interesting. I just hadn't been public in that way. So I was truly, yeah, I was posting as we were writing. So I felt like I was flying the plane as I was building it. And I actually think that was a
Right.
really, really good for me, actually, just to see. And even
Mm.
now, I go back and I think the prompts, and I don't know how much you've talked about this, but the prompts that you offer that are really timeless prompts, I felt like even now, today I posted something that I wrote during the sprint and I thought, oh, wow, that was really good actionable advice. And there were a couple of tweaks I made just towards what I'm talking about right now in terms of my signature framework of this 5-minute fundraising ask. And I'm thinking towards a lead generator I just created, which is 8 phrases not to use in fundraising. And that I'm excited to share
Mm.
that with the world. We can talk about it at the end where to find it, but I'm really excited about that. So there's ways that I'm tweaking some of the things that I wrote 4 months ago, but that it all feels really easy. And it means that I can focus my LinkedIn time in the week in relationship building and commenting on other people's things and really building relationships. And it just that uses a different part of my brain than the actual creation. So I love
Right.
it. I love batching like that. That's definitely a habit I'm going to keep up.
You brought up so many good pieces right there, including the piece around, and I didn't even know to talk about this the first time I launched the sprint that
Mhm.
much, which was that this work really is evergreen and timeless and fully repurposable.
Yep.
Because the thing is, like, when you're spending so much time on these pieces, it feels, oh my gosh, there's no way that I could like share this again. This was a one and done. But if you share the first couple of posts that you did that you shared 6 months ago, first of all, you'll have new people in your audience who haven't had the chance to read that amazing work. And secondly, there's going to be people who like just needed to hear it like in a different part of their life or needed to hear it in
Mhm.
a different way. So I think that just like you said before, how you're creating this like library of accessible content, I think all of this work is 6 months from now, you can just repeat it all over again. And I love too how you brought up the piece around community, because we said this once before, but this work is vulnerable. And when we're doing it with other people who are also sharing not similar things, but similar in similar ways, I think
Mhm.
that we can really support each other. We can really support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think to your point about repurposing content, I did a fair amount of that. I had I haven't even really tapped into all of the writing that I already have. So I had a few blog posts, and you were great about looking to some of those as well. And I realized, well, within these blog posts, I probably had 6 months of content right there if I just wanted to stay within 3 blog posts that I wrote or
Right.
podcasts that I've been on, and just like looking over the transcriptions of podcasts. And I love, and that's something that I'll continue to do more of, is just almost go back into the vault of podcasts that I've been doing the past couple of years. And I love the idea of revisiting those and sharing some of the takeaways as my post. And then obviously in the comments, linking to the entire podcast and continuing to offer that exposure to a new audience, to the podcast hosts. And yeah, I think if there's someone who's been around for a while, but who hasn't been on LinkedIn, I do think that there's just so much content that can be repurposed for LinkedIn. And like you said, also that can be repurposed on LinkedIn, or can be repurposed towards whether that's a newsletter or blog or whatnot, that it can continue to be repurposed. It's just continuing to figure out different ways to say our messaging. And you say this a lot, but I love just the reminder that things that feel second nature to us, in terms of the things that we have expertise in or that we have experience in, that to everyone else, it's new information. So hearing it different ways, and like you said, in different moments of their lives, I feel like there's so many messages that I'm continuing to just say a slightly different way in order to hopefully reach my audience in a deeper way.
100%, 100%. And that's actually similar to fundraising as well. Like at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, like we have a core message, maybe 2 or 3 core messages, and we're just trying to find like dozens of new ways to share them over and over again so that they're actually felt and internalized.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that. I have a question for you before I ask you about like how can people work with you? How can people find you? And I just thought of asking you this. What would you tell someone if they were currently afraid, nervous, feeling imposter thoughts, being visited by the spirit of perfectionism, and something was stopping them from sharing stories and getting visible on LinkedIn? Like, what advice would you have for someone listening who just isn't sure if they're ready?
I'd say that it's already inside you. I like to say, I posted about this at one point, and it wasn't a post that's gotten the most visibility, and maybe I'll repost it. But as a kid, I loved The Wizard of Oz, and I thought of myself as
Mhm.
Dorothy. And all I wanted as a kid was to go off to some magical land where I had something really special. I had my own ruby slippers. That I was special, that I was unique, and people wanted to be around me for that uniqueness. Go figure. My Emerald City did end up being New York City. But I've realized in the past couple of years that I've aged and I've grown into Glinda instead as the good witch. And I just dropped into me was just to say, you've got the power, you've had the power all along. And so I think that we need to move through our own obstacles, our own challenges, our own inner, our own inner, I was like jungle gym, not that, but like our own, I don't know, our own inner puzzles pieces that we're trying to
Yeah.
work through. We need to work through that because somebody is going to be really touched by what you share. And a lot of people are actually going to be touched by what you have to share. And so it's like I think we owe that to the world to bring our most authentic, candid selves. That's how we truly do connect to other people, and other people can learn from us. And I'll say, I just, as someone who was a theater director for all those years, I wasn't on LinkedIn, I wasn't using social media for business purposes in this way. I am shocked and delighted that this has become such a creative outlet for me and for my
Mm.
writing. And even deeper than that, and I think you've said this lots of times, but it truly is self actualization for me. I feel like
Mm.
I am being able to be more honest with myself about who I am and the things that I'm learning and where I am now and where I've been and where I would like to go. And to be able to share that and share that with an audience and have people responding to it. And I just feel so excited and so invigorated every time somebody writes to me and says, I'm so glad you articulated this. I didn't know anybody else felt like that, or you're making me feel like I can do this. And I do. I really believe that we can all share our gifts and that we all have something really unique to share with the world. And so, yeah, it is scary, but it's worth it.
That was so beautiful. That was so beautiful. What I really heard is like you tapping into your big Glenda energy, which is healing you, but also rippling out like a fractal and healing everybody that you come across, that you're meant to come across, people
Yeah.
who are feeling icky about fundraising. And it is invisibly, but very tangibly changing the world and how we think about fundraising, which fundraisers themselves are changing the world in their own nonprofits and their own creative projects. So think about the impact. We can't always see it, but I feel like we can feel it. And I love your answer to that. I loved your answer to
Thanks.
that. It's beautiful. So this has been beyond amazing. I'm so grateful to you for sharing your heart with us. And I'd love to know, how can people get in touch with you? How can people work with you? You mentioned a freebie, which I'd love to put in the show notes. But
Yes,
yeah,
I can
tell me
definitely
how
do
people
that.
can get in touch.
Yeah, I'm
For
really
sure.
excited about this freebie that I've recently created and I'm just now launching. It's 8 phrases not to use in your fundraising asks. And so these are what I've come across in the past 18 years, things that will surprise you that I actually would recommend you don't say, and why you should choose a different path. So I think it's juicy, or as you like to say, Tanya, there's some spicy content in that is really my point of view. And I'm really proud of that. So you can sign up through that through my website, which is Kel Haney, my name, which we'll put in the notes, kelhaney.com. Obviously, LinkedIn. I'm on there all the time. Would love to connect with you. Would love to hear what people are resonating with in terms of what I'm saying, and also love to follow and chime in on what other people are discussing. So definitely feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. In terms of working with me, again, we can have an exploratory call through my website. I offer both 5-minute fundraising ask training for not-for-profits, and I also have a wait list. I'm going to be launching a cohort class, which will be for individuals who are creative. I'm thinking more probably in the artist community, or even just fundraisers who are independent, who want to learn my framework and learn that with other like-minded individuals. And you can always find me with Donorly. That's the consulting firm that I work with as well. They do lots of different things, a lot more generalist than I personally am, and also some other specific things like capital campaign and donor research that I'm a part of. But there's colleagues of mine who are real experts on that too. So that's at Donorly.
Amazing. I'm going to put all of that in the show notes. And for folks that are listening, I really, really do encourage you to connect with Kel on LinkedIn. She is such a wonderful community builder and convener, and you won't regret it. I can tell you that. So, Kel, thank you so much again for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Tanya. I feel exactly the same way about you. I'm so excited about what you're building and all the ways that I can support you as you're doing this. So it's my pleasure.
Oh, thanks, friend. Okay, so you've heard from us. Now I want to hear from you. Leaving a review helps us so much in growing our reach and supporting more folks with this podcast. And even better, I would love for you to send me a note on LinkedIn with your takeaways from this episode. I cherish and respond to every message, so I can't wait to hear from you. And if you want to go even deeper, check out the show notes to take your next step.